Good evening and welcome to the September 16th, 2024 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Joe Steiner. I'm chairing the board this year. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with the New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and is also broadcast on Summit's governmental channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. A transcript of this meeting is also being taken using the video and the audio, so we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones in the room, and they're all up front. So when you come to speak for any reason, you need to come forward. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and to the back of the room where you entered. The city does have a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs the hearing assistance, please obtain the system here at the dais and return it thereafter. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll of the members?
Sure. Chairman Steiner?
Here.
Vice Chairman Loiketz?
Here.
Mr. Yuko is excused. Mr. Nelson?
Here.
Ms. Zahn is excused. Mr. Curran?
Here.
Mr. Millay?
Here.
Ms. Toth?
Here.
Ms. Chifo?
Here.
Mr. Feskins?
Here.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Okay, directly to my right is Andy Ball, the zoning board's attorney. He will be advising the board members on matters of law, and he is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Stephanie Sulios, whom you just met, is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Ms. Sulios works with the applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. She also does not vote on the applications. Also present are our experts who are hired annually by the board to provide input to us. Tonight we have Marie Raffi from Collier Engineering, and also present is Ed Snikes from Burgess Associates, our board planner. These experts are seated at the table to the right of the board, the public's left, and they also do not vote on the applications. Our board has 7 members, regular members, and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Before we enter into executive session to vote on an application, you will be advised how many votes are required. Each case will begin with the applicant or their attorney giving an overview of the application and the process that has gone on to date and the variances that are required. We then hear from any additional expert witnesses the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. Board members may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and the expert witnesses. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us what you think about the case. That opportunity comes at the end of the hearing. Before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It is important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record, which once again is why we insist that you come forward and use one of the microphones. After all the witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. The public hearing is then closed, and we as a board enter into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to that executive session, but you are not normally able to participate in that discussion. Our city zoning officer has asked that we remind all applicants that they must carefully read the resolution that documents the zoning board's decision and pay particular attention to the conditions contained in that resolution. For example, if a landscaping plan is required, you have to obtain one and submit it to our city forester, John Linson. If a grading plan is required, you must have one prepared by a civil engineer and submit 3 copies along with the application fee to the city's engineering division. Failure to satisfy all of the conditions in a resolution will result in a delay in approving your application, as it will cause additional work for the city zoning staff. The resolutions documenting the board's decision are normally available 1 month after we decide the case. 2 cases tonight, and we'll begin by asking each one to come forward to the podium and advise us how many witnesses they have and if they feel they can complete their case in 30 minutes. So we begin with Elena Holdings, 29 Ridge Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, James Weber and Samantha Alfonso on behalf of the applicant, 2 witnesses. We should be able to conclude in 30 minutes.
Okay, and the second one is 479 Morris Avenue, Morris LLC for 477 and 479 Morris Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Larry Calley on behalf of the applicant. We have 3 witnesses, 15 minutes or less for each, so 30 to 40 minutes, I think, of direct testimony. We're going to keep it as lean as possible.
Okay, based on that, we will begin with the first case at 29 Ridge Road.
Mr. Karen is recusing, just wanted to.
Okay, we have one of our members is recusing himself. Karen, thank you. Now, I'll bet if he's out, he's Weber, you're out. Not that we haven't seen you here before.
Let me use the chair.
Do we have a new battery in that microphone?
I don't know.
Okay, I just thought we'd check on that handheld one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James Weber on behalf of the applicant, Elena Holdings. This is the corporation with which Matt Michalopoulos is the managing member. Mr. Michalopoulos has brought other applications before this board, recently Hobart Avenue, before that Dogwood, and he's a resident of the city of Summit, living on DeBarry. What you're seeing up now is a perspective of the house that's currently under construction. The roof is on now, and it is moving toward completion. They should be able to get to the inside soon. And what this shows is the perspective of the proposed landscaping along the front on Ridge Road. If I can draw the board's attention then to the site plan. Thank you, Sam.
Sorry. It turned on me.
The site plan proposes a steep slope disturbance of 3,800 square feet, where 4,000 square feet exists on the site. That 4,000 is basically due to 2 berms, one along Fernwood and then one on Ridge, that apparently were the remnants of the excavation that existed when the original home, I think it was the Liss home, Mr. Chairman. So, and may have been Liss Pharmacy's home. I'm not sure. But the original home has been demolished. It was of no significance according to HPC, and it had suffered from deferred maintenance over the years. When we're looking at the site plan, if we can scroll in toward the driveway, to the north are the Glassband's property, and Lisa and Todd Glassband are interested neighbors. They're here. I also thought I saw Phyllis Sank here, and I believe she is there. There's Ms. Sank. And she is to the left of the property. With regard to the driveway is set 8 feet off the lot line. As the board knows, 2 feet is required. This is 4 times the required setback in order to achieve a greater degree of space between this lot and the Glassban's property. Likewise, the retaining wall that's proposed, and that's shown as a black line, is set back 5 feet from the lot line as well. Again, more than is required. With regard to the stormwater and the area that is being disturbed by this, or the amount of steep slopes being disturbed by the improvements, they would include where the dry wells are being installed. And then to the right along Fernwood, there's an area of steep slope that will be smoothed out. And then along Ridge, that is the berm that I referred to before, that looks as though it's the excavated spoils of the original house. There's also a minor amount of steep slope to the west. And then there is a steep slope right on Ridge next to the construction driveway. That is not being touched, and those 4 trees that are currently there, plus a 5th, will remain. Likewise, there's a tree in the far northwest corner that is also being retained. There has been discussions with regard to trying to work to save the Norway spruces that are along the north wall. However, the proposed development of this property will not allow them to be preserved. They also suffer from what I'm told is called needle cast. Needle cast is a fungus that apparently drops the old needles, and so you end up with what would look like a lion's tail. With regard to the beech that are also on the property, they are suffering from what's called beech leaf disease. The disease is the result of nematodes and a fungus, and it is affecting all of the beech trees in Summit. It is a fatal disease unless it is treated, but the treatment is only temporary. With regard to the landscaping, if I can go to the landscaping plan. The landscaping is being prepared by Jared Kest, a certified landscape architect. And of particular note, in the landscape plan, when we look at the row of green giants on the north property line, it includes 3 green giants at a 20 to 22 foot height at planting. That is a remarkable number, and usually what this board sees is 8 to 10. But out of consideration of the position of the glass bands along that north property, Mr. Michalopoulos has directed Mr. Kest to install 3, and the reason I pause is I really, in a future application by another applicant, I just would hope that the board doesn't say, can we get a 20-foot tall green giant on some other landscaping plan? This is a unique setting, and it's one point that if the board approves the application, consideration should be given to conditioning it upon a 2-year retention of jurisdiction, because the larger the trees, the less vibrant they are, and they're not as capable of being transplanted. So that is one point that would be suggested. Likewise, there's 14 to 16 foot green giants that are also in there. And then with regard to the rest of that wall, there's an extension of additional green giants. There are a number of deciduous trees throughout, and one of the comments, and this is for Ms. Sank's ears, she wants the hemlocks that are on the property line between her property to the left and the property under consideration to be preserved. They will be preserved. So they were due to be removed, and that has been changed, so they will be preserved. Unless the board has any questions of me, I would get into the steep slope application and call Andrew Clark to the stand to be sworn in to give testimony.
First of all, thank you.
Questions from the board?
Yeah,
Go ahead, you're up first.
thank you.
Do you want to talk to the engineer or the landscape architect?
No. In fact, I need the applicant himself. The first thing, I thank you for this nice introduction. However, I have a few questions that are necessary for me to evaluate. The reason we're here is because there was a violation committed by the applicant at this location. So I wonder, at that time, that is March 3rd, 2024, what was the construction situation at that time? Was it completed? Was that house built?
No, the house was not
The
completed.
house was,
It was under construction.
There was a house that was demolished. When was that house demolished?
That house would have been demolished, I believe, in 2023.
Is the applicant
The
going to
permits were no
testify? We
longer-
can ask him that question then.
I have that information.
I was going to go right to the steep slope, but to the extent that we
Well,
need him in.
there has been a lot of discussion or a lot of concern about what happened and the fact that there had to be a stop order. We are supposed to hear testimony tonight from somebody as to whether or not everything happened the way our city zoning folks and Department of Community Services has ordered. We're looking for that testimony from I assume the applicant, from you, from whomever, to know exactly what did happen and where we are in this situation.
Very good. With regard to the notice of violation, there was no stop work order. The notice of violation came out on March 13th,
Right.
and it had 4 conditions associated with it.
Right.
Those 4 conditions have all been met. If we
Including
can
the
take
soil,
everything.
conservation of
What
Somerset
I'm-
County?
Let him answer the question first.
What I'm
Then we'll
showing you is
go
the
after.
report of Lindsay Knight, who is your planner, who acts on behalf of the city in lieu of Krista Anderson. And if we take a look, we see that in her first point, Mr. Schrager has confirmed the applicant has addressed all items identified within his letters. And those were the letters that were the notice of violation. So Ms. Knight has confirmed that that's all been done, that all 4 steps have been met, and that included getting the application in within 30 days. So it's all attended to in that regard. With regard to the disturbance itself, that came as a result of a tree removal. As part of the tree removal, while the contractor was there and the trees were cut down, decided it would be efficient to remove the stumps. When he removed the stumps, he disturbed the soil, and as a result, that's what triggered the steep slope disturbance.
Were these trees removed without permit?
No, they had a permit to be removed,
Okay.
and at the time that they then were cut down, then the decision is, well, what do we do with the stumps? We do it later, or they did it then? They did it then.
Let's go back to my question.
Mhm.
What was exactly the construction status, conditions at time of this violation?
I believe that the foundation would have been poured at that point.
The foundation were poured.
I think
Yes,
so.
the foundation was poured, framing.
Wait a
If we're
minute,
gonna have
we
him
need-
testify.
We're going to need to bring you up and get you sworn in if you're going to testify.
I'm still,
You're staying with the attorney.
yes. So at this stage, do you have percentage of the disturbance that was available, that required this violation?
We've anticipated that question. Andrew Clark will have that information.
Thank you. Okay. So I understand that there is a letter from the Somerset County.
There's an
approving
email that was sent to Andrew Clark, and that was conveyed to Aaron Schrager.
this. Okay. Thank you, that's all.
Any other questions to the attorney from at this point from the board?
Mr. Chairman, is the applicant going to testify to answer the other question? Otherwise, I have a
don't know.
follow-up
I
question
don't
for
know if
Mr.
he's
Weber.
going, that's a question that the attorney will have to answer for us.
Well,
Not-
then
not ready
I'll
for
ask
the
the
public
question to
yet.
Mr. Weber right now. What was they took down the trees, they were always going to grind the stumps. What was the plan for the disturbance at that time?
At that time, as with most steep slope disturbances, and the board has seen this, when you're in the midst of construction and you're constructing a new home, the determination as to where the landscaping is going, what is going to be provided as an amenity for the prospective purchaser is still going to develop. So as that goes along, then the decision would have been made later on to say, okay, what do we need here? That has been accelerated in this application because of the violation by the removal of the stumps, thereby creating the disturbance of the steep slope. Ordinarily, the landscaping, those decisions all go with the input from the prospective purchaser.
So are you testifying that you would have been in front of this board for a variance at a later date prospectively?
It would have been properly, yes. But at this point, since the application had to be brought to the board, we know that the board wants to see the full picture. So as a result, at this point, it's the full picture that's being presented.
And some of the earlier things that we've seen indicated that you were going to clear the land completely, and now you're not, so there's been lots of changes.
The statement by Mr. Linson of a clear cut is not that far removed. So it's not completely accurate. There are two significant trees being retained. There's the 4 trees next to the construction area that are being retained. So there are trees that are being retained. But other than those, most of those trees, the ones along the front on the berm, are going to be removed and replaced with other trees. The trees along the north property line, that suffer from the fungus, the needle cast, those are going to be removed, and those are the ones being replaced with the green giants of significant size. There's also Norway maples along the property line with the Sanks. Those will probably be removed as well. Those are shown in the removal of the trees. There are 3 trees that are significant, 36 inches each, and those are in the middle of the yard. But because the yard, in order to manage this steep slope, is going to be raised up, as Mr. Linson indicated, they will not survive. What the applicant is willing to do is, the city has adopted a new tree ordinance just this summer. While it doesn't apply to this application, nonetheless, the applicant is willing to say, on the replacement, they will be guided and held to the standards in the new ordinance. So it'll be the first time that this is going to be applied, and we'll see how that works. And so that will be something that they'll have to go for the tree permit, if the board approves the application, and then they will have to comply with the new standards for replacement trees. And they're willing to do that.
Any other questions
I
for
have
the
a que- I
attorney?
have a question. Referring to Mr. Malay's question before, so on, was it March 13th, at that point, it was just the foundation was poured?
Okay. Mr. Clark, the engineer, has just indicated to me that he's willing to go all over this because he had done the survey and he was on site. He'll be able to answer that question more authoritatively than I will.
Well, we may come back to it if we need to, but we'll hold off at this point.
So my question is if there was a violation on March 13th, and we only had a foundation, by continuing building the house, I mean, the house, it looks like it's pretty much, I mean, the roof's on, a lot more has been done since that point in time. If you don't get this approval for this variance, I mean, why would you continue on building until you got the variance? What's the plan? Is it just assuming that you'll take care of it, you know,
That's a very
Andrew.
good question. Let's call Mr. Clark to the stand to answer it.
Okay, we'll get to him, I promise. I promise you'll get your answer. Not now, but, okay. Are there
Joe?
any other questions from the board to the attorney for what he stated up to this point? Don?
I think this might apply. So are you testifying that the dry well?
I just want to point out, the attorney's not
I'm
testifying.
sorry, so are
We've
you
heard
stating,
that.
are you stating that the dry well, the driveway, proposed patio, and the blocks to the patio, those are on the original plans?
The driveway in the original plan that the city approved, the driveway was there, but it was not in the same location.
And where was it?
It was in the same general area, but tucked over closer to the glass bands away to stay out of the steep slope area. Likewise, the patio wasn't included at that point, and it was all trimmed.
So was the dry well still included in that?
No, the dry wells haven't, I don't believe, again, Andrew Clark's here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't, I see what I see in front of me, I didn't see the previous plans.
Right.
So it's just striking me funny that, you know, we rely on professionals to design our homes, and we kind of know the ordinances that are in town, and to move forward with this, knowing that we're disturbing such a large percentage of the steep slope, and then to continue moving forward with that without the proper guidance, just kind of baffles me.
Well,
know?
it's something where, in terms of the amount of steep slope, while that is 3,800 out of the 4,000, the total amount of steep slope is certainly not anything compared to what this board has dealt with on any number of other applications, where they were in the thousands and tens of thousands. So a significant amount of steep slopes. This, when you look at the steep slopes that are here, they're really in a perimeter. We're not looking at something where we're dealing with a slope that you're going to be putting up the 10-foot walls that this board has seen. 10 foot back in, and then another 10. So
But we handle each case individually, and
Correct.
we don't rely on other ones to decide this one. So let's stay with that.
very good.
Any other questions on his opening to this point? Because his opening's going to continue, I believe.
No,
Um,
I'm ready
Am I
to-
correct?
I'm ready to call Mr. Clark.
Okay, so then I am going to, only because I've seen a lot of hands up. If anyone has a question for the attorney, now would be the time to come forward and ask that question, and questions only. You can come up to that microphone there.
Thank you. Lisa Glassband, 42 Fernwood Road. My property's adjacent to the applicant, 29 Ridge. Mr. Weber, I just wanted to make sure that I understood your testimony previously. Is it correct that Mr. Clark is going to be addressing the 4 points in the notice of violation during this hearing?
The 4 points of, set forth in the notice of violation have already been addressed, and we have the board's own expert saying that they've been satisfied, and we have the person who signed the notice of violation, Aaron Schrager, confirming that.
Okay, but we'll be able to examine the witness on those 4 points. You'll present evidence that all 4 points were met. That's the reason why we're here today. Those 4 conditions were to be met as a prerequisite to this hearing. So I just want to make sure that you're going to procedurally offer that evidence, is
That's
all.
been offered, and it has been confirmed by the board's own planning expert,
Okay, we'll,
Lindsay.
Yeah, well,
Knight.
there probably won't be any testimony to that if I'm correct, because we have received certification from Mr. Schrager that it's been done. So we have to proceed, I believe, if I'm not incorrect, that indeed the matter is, has been done.
It's already been addressed and confirmed by the city.
So there's no need for additional
Okay.
testimony on that, because we have it from our experts that it has been done.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the attorney? Seeing none,
I would ask that Andrew Clark be called to the stand to be sworn in to give testimony in this matter. Where are you comfortable, Mr. Clark?
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Andrew Clark, Clarke.
Thank you. I know we've accepted you on a number of occasions, including recently as an expert engineer. I am going to just ask, because there are interested parties, that you do review your background and experience for the board as well.
Certainly. I hold a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, as well as a bachelor's degree in land surveying. I obtained licensure in both. My license is currently in good standing. I have testified before numerous boards, this board, as you indicated, with some frequency. The Chatham Borough Planning and Zoning Boards, Madison Planning and Zoning Boards, Florham Park Zoning Board are the most recent other towns where I've testified as an engineer.
And just to confirm, you said licensed. I assume you mean in the state of New Jersey, correct?
Correct, correct.
Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept them once again?
I think we will accept your credentials and welcome back.
Thank you, thank you.
Just a couple of questions, Mr. Clark.
Sure.
Are you familiar with the Development Regulations Ordinance of the City of Somerville?
I am.
And are you familiar particularly with the steep slope ordinance within the DRO?
I am.
And you're familiar with the city itself
Yes,
and this site?
yes.
And how did you achieve that familiarity with the site?
I have been involved in the project from the beginning of the project. I conducted a survey of the property. I prepared the engineering plans that were submitted for both permitting and for this variance application.
Very good. And would you be so kind as to share with the board the plan for engineering that is up on the easel and on the video?
See if it works.
We're hoping. We're hoping they replace the battery. But one of these years, I'm going to have to bring my own battery.
So I have on the board here to just describe first the existing conditions as per the survey that was conducted. I think what's on the screen there is the actual grading plan. But this is the survey itself. Just to describe what the existing conditions were at the beginning of all this. I conducted the survey in December of 2023, December 14th. And at the time of the survey, you have Ridge Road on the bottom of the page, Fernwood to the right or to the east. There's an existing dwelling that existed with a deck above a patio just behind the house. Some connecting walkways on the left, and the driveway for this site was to the front-facing garage on Ridge Road on the left or westerly side of the lot. As was described generally, there are a couple of sections of steep slopes that existed on the property and largely still do.
And how are they designated?
So your ordinance designates anything over 15% slope, which in layman's terms mean if you go about 6.5 feet and go up 1 foot, that's 15%. So as defined within the ordinance of slopes greater than 15% are shown and hatched on this survey. There's a small section to the left of what was the existing driveway, and then on the other side of the driveway along the frontage, and then there's a break in that where the walkway came up to the house. And then again, picking up on the Fernwood side, there's a section of steep slope right along the frontage all the way down. And there's a little finger of steep slopes that's kind of just barely steep slopes that reach to the portico entrance of the existing house. And then the final section sweeps around the back of the house. As Mr. Weber indicated, it's reasonable to surmise that that was, fill from the excavation of the original basement in the house.
What's the date on this survey?
So my survey is dated April 9th, 2024. That's the date that I issued the survey, but the note indicates that the field work was done on December 14th, 2023. So all of these areas total are approximately 4,000 square feet of slopes. it leaves a substantial area behind at the toe of the slope to the north, where it's actually rather flat in here. And most of the areas directly around the dwelling are not steep slope areas. So that was the existing condition. The X's that you see on here are just indicating on the survey some of the trees that would be removed.
And what was, if I can?
Yeah, sure.
What's the change in elevation from the panhandle to the northwest to the lowest portion?
So the area, the northwest that Mr. Weber is referring to as the panhandle up here is at about 105, contour 105, elevation 105, and then the lowest area is right in this area. It's about 99. The 99 area is all over in here, and it's pretty flat. And out in front, we have higher grades. So, you know, the street out front is 107, 108, and up by the house, the existing house was about 112, almost 113, and then in the middle, it's actually higher. So it's like almost 114, 113.8 in this area in the middle of the front yard. It's a little bit unusual to have that sort of rough area that's raised up in front of the house.
What's the percentage of disturbance at this stage? When you took
So when I did the survey,
Can we let him complete his testimony,
Yeah,
and then
well-
we'll ask questions at the end?
yeah, when I did the survey, the site was not disturbed in December. So in December of 2023, there was, the construction had not begun. I'm gonna go over the timeline in a second. I'll give you the timeline in just a second.
Okay.
So the initial effort was to get demolition permitting, which we needed some survey mapping and basic mapping for, and the initial tree removal permit to remove some of the trees that at the time, the ordinance designated anything over 16 inches as requiring a permit. And so that was the initial survey, was moving towards that, and of course a plan to get permits. The next plan I have here is a lot grading plan dated February, it was dated November 6, 2023, and last revised February 2nd, 2024. This is the permit plan that was submitted for permitting, and also to initiate the demolition process. So that is dated February 2nd. The demolition permit was applied for, and the demo work, some of the demo, I misspoke about the date. Some of the demo work had begun just about the same time I was doing the field work for the survey. So at that time, what they were doing was pulling down interior walls, because they kept a lot of the foundation was maintained. Probably 80% of the foundation, the existing foundation, was maintained.
There was a basement?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
He said there was
If
a
there was a
basement.
basement,
Okay.
Yes, there's a basement. So at the time that I did the survey, they had begun some of the demolition, just the early stages of some of the demolition to remove windows and the roof framing and so forth. So
Okay, I'm
that-
not gonna ask the obvious question. Without a permit, you did demolition?
No, they had the demolition permit by then. So the demo permit was issued on November 29th. And then by the end of the first week, second week of December, when I did the survey, they had just started doing the actual work.
Okay.
I'm sorry to jump in here.
That's okay.
I don't,
We're all doing it, so
I
you're
know.
on.
Yeah, well-
no. This is more procedural. There's so many papers here. I don't believe we have a copy of the February 2nd.
Yeah, I
That
wasn't sure
survey,
if you did either.
And so we
mean,
just might want to
obviously-
mark that as an exhibit.
Yeah, it's obviously on file with the city under the permitting, but it may not have been submitted as part of the package for the application.
So if we could please mark that as A1?
How about A2, since
Okay.
the presentation would be A1?
Yep.
Thank you,
Should
Ms.
we-
Stowe.
mark his entire package as A2 so that he gives us the whole package in case there's something else in there?
Very good.
Sure.
So that would include the original survey? You have that in A1 as well? Oh, it's all right.
So at the time, coming back to your question, at the time the survey was done, they were just in the beginning stages of the demolition work. Nothing outside was going on other than, trucks pulling up and, some equipment. So then the plan was developed for the permitting, which is dated, revised February 2nd. And the tree removal permit, initially, the tree removal permit was issued on February 22nd, so a few weeks later. And the tree work took place like the last week of February, first week of March. By March 8th, I think the tree work was done. So I'll just briefly explain this permit plan then. So the permit plan, there's an addition in the corner, it's basically like a new house, but we used about 80% of the foundation. So let's talk about it as though it's a new house. So we have the house going in. We're changing the driveway arrangement to come off Fernwood instead of Ridge Road. This is just a temporary driveway that's indicated here for soil erosion. And over here on the northeast corner is where the driveway was planned to come in and access the garage under. So it's lower in the back, so this is a garage under the first floor in the back side. The silt fence, in order to maintain the limits of disturbance for the steep slopes for the permit, we had the silt fence wrap around and stay upslope of this section of the silt fence that's in the back, and then come across and down, because there were a couple of trees right here by where the end of the driveway was proposed that we had secured a permit to take out. And then the silt fence came around here.
And when you say around here, you're talking around the north
Along the
property.
northerly boundary out to Fernwood Road. And then coming back to Ridge, on the other side of the construction road, we ran the silt fence on the bottom of the steep slopes and then cut easterly across the middle of the front yard and then wrapped around to the portico area. The intention was to maintain all these steep slopes in here as undisturbed. So what happened that triggered the violation notice is there are a collection of trees that are right in here that were all,
When you say here, you're
I'm
talking.
sorry, just to the east side of the proposed renovation area on the Fernwood Road side, there were a collection of trees that were 6, 8 inches, 10 inches in that area that wasn't steep slopes. So the tree contractors, when they came in, went through this area. So this area, this little finger that's just by the portico area and then reaching towards Fernwood Road steep slopes, that area was disturbed. So that was one of the exceedances. That was one of the excesses above what our limitations were from the permit. And that's about a little less than 300 square feet in area. And then over on the back side, the north side of the dwelling, and just past the end of the proposed driveway where those 2 larger trees were removed, that's one of the areas where in the grinding, they exceeded that silt fence area by probably 100 or 150 square feet. It wasn't much. So this area right here and this area right here were the 2 areas of steep slopes that were disturbed, that were beyond what the limits that were set. That's what triggered the violation notice in mid-March. And so that violation was issued. There were the 4 conditions to restore any fencing limits to this plan. To this plan, I did provide a little bit of stakeout to make sure that was restored properly. The soil erosion measures to be re-verified and reconstituted to the extent that any of them were damaged. And then recertification from soil erosion based on that. So all those things were done. The fourth condition was to apply for the variance, which we also did. So that summarizes the notice of violation and what led to it and how that ended up happening. So before I go farther, if there are any
Andrew, I
questions
think
on
they
that
wanted to know
point.
where the house construction was at. Do you remember?
Well, I mean,
We can't hear you, so you're gonna have to speak louder.
I was just asking Andrew to.
Yeah,
You have to ask
Say
him.
something.
at
Okay.
that point, it was still tail end of demo work, because demo started in mid-December, so they got the demo work done. I don't remember the exact date. I did do a stakeout for the foundation that was for the addition area in the back. I did a stakeout for that to help guide that construction. So I think they, at that point, had the foundation up and were working on framing, starting to frame it up.
Assuming that you had a building permit, the one thing that I haven't heard is a building permit for the new house was issued when?
November 2023.
Well, that
You
was-
have to be operating under
that was
a
when
building
the-
permit.
Yeah, I don't know if the demo permit was issued at the same time as the building permit. They usually are done together.
I'm based on the SDL portal, which I can try to pull up real quick to show if you'd like. I understand the demo permit and the building
But there
permit
was
were
a building
both
permit
issued
that
in
allowed you
November
to
of
build the
2023.
building that is there now, because there could be confusion saying, okay, you got a demo permit, but then how do you put a building
Yeah,
up?
there definitely was, and I double checked in my emails that, what I usually get involved in is the engineering part of it. So on February 7th, I got an email from engineering saying that the last revision dated February 2nd was approved for engineering. So on February 7th, we had engineering approval for the plans. Now, I don't follow the, subcode part of it as closely, but usually it's around the same timeline or just after that is when all that work comes through in terms of the permitting. So
Okay.
it definitely is all being done under permit.
Questions
Questions on the process to that point?
so far?
Yeah, in this plan, how much of the steep slope was disturbed by the proposed driveway?
So there was some disturbance, obviously, and the total disturbance per this plan was just under 1,000 square feet, because that's the waiver threshold.
Okay.
So we had 970 square feet as being disturbed. That's why there really wasn't any margin for going a couple hundred square feet of additional disturbance. That's what triggered the notice of violation.
And then in this plan, is the driveway, I guess it's the apron of the driveway? Is that meet within requirement? I mean, you got the engineering
Yes.
approvals. Is
I
it
don't
far
have
enough
the
away from the
dimension on
property
there,
line?
But I think it's 4 or 5 feet. It's
So it
definitely more
met
than
the
the 2
requirement.
feet that Summit requires.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have given you the engineering.
Correct, correct. And then we just had a wall framing the backside of that driveway. Because we were coming up a little bit with the driveway and the grade's lower in there.
Question on this side.
Okay, back to my question from before. March 13th, you get the violation. At that point, we said we had a foundation. I remember seeing the site, and there really wasn't, actually, no, it must have been after that I saw the site. You got the violation, continued building. At that point, knowing that there was a violation, if you redesigned the house and put the driveway back where it was on Ridge Road, would we even be here? If you stopped, rethought the whole process, the design of the house.
Yeah, we would be there for a front-facing garage.
Okay, but I'm talking about the steep slope, we wouldn't be here.
Oh,
So
well,
to continue building the house when you were in violation, right now, you're pretty far down, the house is it looks almost done, at least on the outside. To sit there and say, if we do not give you the variance for this steep slope, what are you doing? Your driveway's already set and there's a garage set there. Whereas if you stopped and waited till you got the variance and said, okay, wait a minute, hold on, if we don't get the variance, we could put the driveway in the front of the house, like just redesign the whole house. I feel like you went beyond where you can go back at this point. If you do not take this variance, what are you doing?
We're doing exactly what's on this plan, which was approved and permitted.
But if you can't get the variance for the steep slope, what are you gonna do? How would you?
If the board were to come to the conclusion that the merits of the proposal do not warrant the variance, then at that point, there would have to be a reduction in the amount of steep slope disturbance and put back. But the point that is presented to the board, and this comes from Cohen versus Fairlawn, you have the right to bring the application, and you're not prevented. The board is not bound to grant the variance, you're not. You have discretion. You can sit there and say, yeah, we don't see it, the proofs have not been met. And that burden's on us, on the applicant, to show those proofs. Our position is that what is being shown is a better design, is consistent with the purposes of the steep slope ordinance. Remember, steep slope ordinance is not designed to prohibit development. It is to reasonably control development. So it doesn't say prohibit. It says reasonably control. And that's what your duty is here in looking at the ordinance. Does this reasonably control development? Does this prevent siltation? Is the result of this going to be reduction in erosion? Are we going to manage stormwater? And the answer to all that is yes. And so by the time this is finished, when you look at the purposes of your steep slope ordinance and sit right out there in the first sentence, it's to reasonably control, not prohibit. So it's not a lockdown. Of course, this is Summit. If you were to stop development completely in steep slopes, people wouldn't be able to do anything. So in that regard, you're in a situation
So what
where
you're saying is that there is, or could be, an alternate to what's proposed here, if indeed the board feels you're not meeting what it needs to be met.
I suppose, yeah, it could be done. And I'm just, again, when I look at the steep slope area requirements, 35-16.1, the purpose of this article is to provide for reasonable control of development within the steep slope areas of the city. Reasonably control, not prohibit.
But there can be more than one way to skin the cat.
There can be.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, math question. You were originally going to disturb just under 1,000 square feet.
Correct.
Okay, so the tree removal fellow disturbed 100 or so square feet here and
About
300
here,
there.
100 and something there,
Okay,
yeah.
so that gets us up to about 1,400 square feet of steep
Approximately.
slope, but you came in with 4,000 square feet disturbed.
That's right, that's the next stage.
Okay.
Yeah, that has not been
Yeah.
disturbed.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no,
that's
yeah,
requesting.
so that's the next step.
Okay, we did the violation, now we do the next, isn't it?
Right, because
Okay.
once you hit the violation and we're in front of this board, probably ahead of what we were planning to do, then now we're looking at the whole picture.
Mr. Clark, before you continue,
Sure,
just
sure.
one question.
Yeah.
I noticed on the plans that I see in front of me, the stormwater management, post dry wells, was that not required in that plan that you're showing
It
right
was
there?
not. In this plan, we were actually reducing the lot coverage by about a little over 300 square feet. So the Summit ordinance
Mhm.
indicates that anything where you exceed more than 300 square feet of new impervious coverage, then stormwater management
I'm
kicks in.
assuming that's gonna lead us into why we're going to 4,000 feet now of the disturbance?
3,800 if I can.
So now I'm going to turn to the plan that you do have in front of you, which is the lot grading plan, last revised June 21st, 2024. So understanding that we were coming in front of this board for the steep slopes violation, it made sense at this juncture to move forward with the effort to look at the whole plan and take care of it all at the same time in terms of the application and hearing this application for development. So The difference between what I showed you and what is on this plan is that there's a little more well-developed hardscape and landscape, and we're redoing the grading in the backyard for a couple of reasons. First, there's been a couple of questions about the driveway. We slid the driveway a little farther away from lot 24 to the north.
I
So-
said 8 feet. Is it 8 feet
So
further?
it's now 8 feet away. The balance of the driveway is in essentially the same location. It's just the throat and the, where it touches down at Fernwood, the access point was just shifted a little bit and a radius applied versus the previous plan. But the bulk of that driveway is in exactly the same place. So what we're doing with this plan now is, instead of having this low area that's in the backyard, which currently, water settles in there quite a bit. We get water from, that's not actually lot 24 to the west, it's 26, the Sank lot, just to the west. We get some runoff that comes from that backyard onto our property. I actually stopped there on the way here, and you can see the path where it comes on, and a little bit of siltation from that big event we had recently. And
When you
so-
say big event,
the big rain event that we had.
Thank you.
Yeah, it almost doesn't need explanation. But, so we take on water from the neighboring property, and it sits in here. It's sort of a flat, low spot. So what we're proposing to do is, where the walkout of the basement is underneath the deck, we're then planning to introduce a patio and then have this area very gently graded, so leveled off. So we're filling in that area to accomplish that. And then placing a wall, as Mr. Weber indicated, 5 feet on our side of the line. And recognizing that the main issue with steep slopes is erosion and runoff. Those are the main things that we want to guard against. What we're actually doing in this backyard here is completely eliminating all of the steep slopes, which in my view is the best way to control steep slope impacts, is to not have them. So what we're doing is gently grading, and at the top of this wall, on the uphill side, we're introducing an infiltration drain, a linear drain that's, river rock or stone down into a perforated pipe that will connect directly into the tank system that we're introducing in the driveway now. So we're gonna, any runoff that makes its way to that wall, we're gonna pick up. We're also putting a wall on the westerly side of that line, and this wall is like 2 to 3 feet high over there. And then on the downhill side, on the back side of that wall, we're gonna put a drain where that water comes onto us. So we're gonna pick up that water that's coming onto us and put it into the driveway and manage it in here. We're also introducing a drain at the end of the driveway to pick up the driveway, and we're taking the back half of the house and the roof leaders from the back half into the drywall system. So this is all leveled out, drainage here, drainage at the driveway, and a 2-tank system to manage that drainage. We have dug a hole to inspect the soils. I don't normally do that in advance of construction work, but since we had personnel on site and we had equipment there in the approximate area of that tank, I did do a test pit, and the soils do look serviceable in terms of the perk rate. So I don't think we're facing a problematic situation in terms of their function. The front half of the house, what I'm proposing is to drain it, run those roof leaders to daylight at the curb line, which on Ridge Road slopes down towards Summit Ave. I think that's appropriate in this case. Summit does allow that. And in this case, what we're capturing here is about 1,600 square feet of roof area.
when you say here,
As I indicated on the proposed dwelling, the dwelling under construction, the front half of that house is about 1,600 square feet of roof area. But what we've done from the existing condition is remove the 1,400 square foot driveway, and then the existing dwelling that was there had its water moving towards that same direction. So in net, we're reducing the runoff contribution to that road. There was a comment indicating from your engineer, Mr. Fay, that it might be worth considering to connect the entire roof to the dry well. I'd prefer not to do that for a couple of reasons. One is I think it's perfectly reasonable to do as I just described, with the roof leaders in the front going to the roadway. Second is I don't like generally, and we try to avoid, taking water that ends up in one place and moving it to a place that it didn't previously go. So in the existing condition, the water in the front of the house and the driveway moved to Ridge Road. I don't want to take and put it in the backyard where, you know, the overflow and an inundation is out down Fernwood. So we'd be rerouting that runoff to a place it didn't go before. So for those two reasons, I think it's appropriate to have the discharge at the curb.
When you're talking about the existing stormwater flow out to Ridge Road, what was the stormwater management that was there on the site before this?
And roof leaders to daylight, and, you know, driveway would just run off to the road. Now, to put some numbers on it, what we're managing, roof area and driveway, is 3,200 square feet, where our proposal, even though we're not reducing the coverage in this scenario, we're also not increasing it tremendously. We're at about 5,700 square feet of existing lot coverage. We're going to 6,400 square feet, so we're increasing about 700 square feet of impervious area. But what we're managing ostensibly is 3,200 square feet of roof area and driveway. And the calculations for that yield a required storage of about 800 cubic feet. I increased that by 60% to try to account for sort of an somewhat unknown quantity of water coming from the neighboring property. So, you know, that would be the equivalent of another 2,000 plus square feet of impervious area, if you were to think of it that way. So we're providing storage for about 5,000 to 5,500 square feet of impervious surface. In the review memo, there was some discussion or question about the off-site, and it's not a clearly known quantity. That's why I did, you know, the 60% increase as what I think is a pretty strong movement towards handling that. I could do a little more evaluation to figure out how much roof area is, because in this area back here, there's a couple of roof leaders. At the back of this wall, there's a few pipes that come out. I'd have to go when it was raining and take a look at that. There's also a sump pump discharge in that area. So makes it difficult to quantify. It's a little different than saying, you know, we have our new roof that we're putting in and here's the area. But nonetheless, I feel that this is a robust system that's designed to make a net improvement and a substantial improvement in this backyard.
If I can, Mr.
Yes.
Clark, what was required, though, under the ordinance? Were you required to account for the 3,500 square feet?
No, well, that's what I was indicating. Technically, we're required to handle our increase in coverage, which is about 700 square feet of new impervious.
So when you talk,
We're handling more than 5,000.
but that's more than 60%.
Well, it's more than 60% over just the 3,200 square feet of roof area and driveway that we're managing. Because, I mean, look,
So
we're in front of this board asking for permission. And so my MO for these kinds of projects is to go above and beyond, because that's what's warranted in this case. I want to make a substantial improvement. I also want to make a practical design that's going to handle what happens in this backyard, to make it better for this subject property and any, you know, existing impacts that might happen to the neighboring property by virtue of the pass-through. So that details the rear yard, what we're doing. In the front yard and along these frontages, in the front, as I said, it sort of comes up and it's higher, and then comes down a little bit to the house. What we're proposing to do is make a more normal arrangement for grading in the front yard. That, you know, you have the front yard and it grades gently down to the street with new landscaping established. That, of course, eliminates this steep slope that wraps around and along Ridge Road here. And then the same thing along the Fernwood Road. We have the steep slopes that comes in this little finger in here. Again, we're introducing more normal grading in there. And what we're also doing is putting a wall along there to affect that change. In the front, we don't need that, and here we do. And part of the reason is that the steep slope continues down to the curb line on that side. And so what we're also introducing by doing that is, in my view, a safer environment for pedestrians in there, because I don't know if you've ever walked down Fernwood Road, but people go a little bit faster than they should, and coming up the bend, there's really nowhere to go other than the curb line, because the slope starts immediately behind the curb there.
So you're talking about walking in the street?
Yeah, you have to walk in the street, right. And so what will result here is a landscaped area that's following the grade of the road up to that wall. And then you'll have the wall that's about 2 to 3 feet, and then you're gonna have, you know, the graded area up to the house. So we're eliminating the steep slopes here, here, and in the back, which, as I testified a minute ago, in my view, is the best way to control steep slope effects. And if it's done well with proper stormwater management and landscaping, I think it results in an overall marked improvement. In this case, probably a dramatic improvement over that existing condition of that existing dwelling when it was there. Because previously, this entire frontage was very overgrown, not managed or kept at all, to the point where there was even maybe some sight distance issues at the intersection, which will be relieved by this proposed condition. So I think the end result will be a beautiful property that functions well.
And you just mentioned you have a good sight distance. I think that was one of the questions either from the planner or the engineer for the board as to the corner.
Yeah, so there's a stop control here on Ridge. Fernwood is through. And so there's a stop sign right here. So the most important thing relative to our intersection is the stopped vehicle being able to see to the north up Fernwood. This will end up in a very good condition in that regard. Partially because you have the curve coming, so it's a little bit easier to get that sight distance, but we're gonna clean up this entire intersection with controlled and managed landscaping that will not impair the view. The only thing that will be in the way is the utility pole that's right on the corner.
I have a question about the,
Yeah. Let's go.
Mr. Clark, can you
Yes.
remind us, is the impervious coverage and the steep slope disturbance thresholds, are they a fixed number or are they a percentage of the lot?
What's permitted?
Yes.
So with impervious coverage, it's a percentage of the lot area.
Okay. For steep slope
For steep
disturbance?
slopes disturbance, there's a waiver that is permitted. It's not guaranteed. It depends on the conditions. But you have to be below 1,000 square feet of disturbance of the steep slopes in terms of grading and things like that. There are other waivers for steep slope disturbance that are not grading. So if we were to put solar panels in, you could affect up to 2,500 square feet, and certain basic landscaping projects that don't change the grade at all, maintenance and landscaping, you can disturb up to 2,500 square feet.
But the 1,000 square feet holds true if your lot's 5,000 square feet or 25,000?
That's correct.
All right.
That's
So
correct.
would it be your testimony then that maybe a 25,000 square foot lot is being unnecessarily penalized because of its size, which is not the typical size within Summit?
In part, and also in part, as Mr. Weber alluded to, the fact that when the house was built and they said, well, let's just grade this off here, there was no steep slope ordinance. And so it's somewhat a burden of the way things were done when the house was built.
Thank you.
All right.
I think there was another question on
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, before we go to anybody else, let's go, are you complete now with your testimony?
Joe, I think Paul had a
We
question.
were gonna walk through Marie Raffet's.
Well, I was gonna go to her for her questions at this point, so she can,
Yeah, I think Paul had a question.
yeah, I have a question about, you said something about eliminating the steep slope in the back of the property. When I was there, when you're, looking out the garages, as soon, not maybe 25, 30 feet out, it drops. Are you saying you're gonna eliminate that drop in
Yeah.
there behind? How you're gonna fill that in?
With a wall, yes. Yeah, putting a wall in along that boundary.
But
and
you're
fill
filling it, you're filling that
Yes,
in?
yeah.
okay. Marie, do you wanna give us your, take your report and,
Sure, and so I recognize that you're probably gonna go through some of this stuff as well, is that right?
That was the proposal.
Okay, so how about I start with some of the things that are cropping up? Could you talk a little bit more about that driveway drain? I know that your intent is to collect all of the water runoff from the driveway, but it's going into, instead of like a driveway trench drain, it's going into like a point source, which I'm not sure how you're gonna get all the driveway water into that.
Yeah, well, what I have established for the grading is that it's pitched in a way that it's pushing the water to the far curb line where that drain is. I mean, we could make a different type of drain. I have a thing about trench drains. I personally and professionally, I don't think they're terribly effective in most settings. They're probably the least maintained drain that I ever see. And most of the time, they're full of silt and they are rendered unusable. I find that this type of drain is more functional. It's not gonna get 100% of the driveway, so there's gonna be a little bit where, the cross pitch isn't catching and directing it all at the very end of the driveway into that drain. But the intent is to have that pitch down, so you have the garage and you're pitching towards that far curb line, and then the water should flow along that curb line. That's the intent. I'm amenable to putting a trench drain in if there's a strong feeling that that would be a better solution in this case.
I'm just considering that if you are planning on collecting all of the water from the driveway, that the asphalt has to be exactly pitched to get into that drain, and I'm concerned about that.
Yeah.
It seems like a point collection instead of, a linear collection where it might be sheet flowing down the entire width of the driveway. I see what you're saying, how you're gonna try and pitch it towards the back property, the northern property, the edge of the driveway.
Curb line, right.
But, it's not a dramatic pitch there either, so.
No, it doesn't have to be too dramatic. 2 to 4% is a good cross pitch to have, water flow. But again, I'm not married to the concept. I guess I was coming at it from the idea that we're already substantially over managing the water. So if there's a little bit of 15-20% of that end of the driveway that isn't quite making it in due to construction not going perfectly, I don't think that's a big impact.
I think I'd rather see a trench drain
Okay.
across the driveway.
That's fine.
If I could, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt us. What is a trench drain?
So a trench drain it's a linear drain, so you see them at driveways or drive entrances to commercial lots sometimes where, they're variable size, 12 inches to 16 inches, depending on how much water you're catching, and then it would span the entire width of the driveway. So that, as Mr. Fay indicated, there's nothing that's really gonna get by it, except in a 4-inch storm in 2 hours.
It's like a gutter that's below ground
Thank you.
with a
Yeah,
grill on it.
with a gutter guard on top.
Could you talk about some of the inverts, how that water is gonna actually drain from the lower inlet down at the end of the driveway to the
Sure.
dry
right,
well
so-
that's up the driveway?
So the dry well, in my detail, I calculated about 4 inches or 4 feet of cover over top of it. So they're gonna be kind of deep. You're gonna have about 4 feet down to the top of the tank. So that puts the inverts of the incoming pipes from the inlet in the driveway and the inlet on the westerly line. So the invert at the westerly line is 99. So we're gonna be probably 98. We're gonna have to be at the inverse of the tank where it comes into the tank. And 99.5 is the invert out at the inlet at the driveway. So those, really by sinking the tanks down, that's how you're gonna get those in.
Okay.
And then in a worst case overflow scenario, the drain at the end of the driveway would just be, surcharged with water, and water would run down the driveway and down Fernwood in an extreme inundation.
Okay, and one of the questions I had was about the collection of the water from the backyard and some of the runoff from the neighboring properties that's coming onto your property, and you're capturing it. And you've testified already that you've increased the size of this by 60%.
That's right.
To account for, additional runoff from the backyard that you're putting into it.
That's correct.
And I also see that you're collecting the back of the house into these dry wells. The front of the house is going to the street where it was before.
Correct.
And I appreciate what you're saying about not taking the water from the other part of the property and putting it all into the dry well. So you're kind of keeping some historical drainage, a little bit of it, not all of it. I understand that as well. Let's see. I think that may be all that I.
Yeah, I feel like I covered a lot of the other points you had in your letter and my testimony.
I have nothing.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just two questions. As you had indicated during the whole sequence of events that there was a tree removal amount that was sort of identified initially. In this new plan with the added grading and filling of the rear area, are you increasing the number of trees to be removed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And those trees were the trees that are identified earlier as being compromised in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have landscaping testimony and design that probably better covers that. I start to drift out of my area.
Well, one of the points that is important to note, if I can, Mr. Snickes, is that when you show in your plan tree to remain, there's other trees around that, some Norway maple, some other voluntary trees. Those would not be, in effect, to be remain. Those would be removed. And as indicated, to the extent that the board approves the application, those replacement would include those smaller trees. We do know that there's another beech backed by the 24-inch tree that's being kept that has beech leaf disease as well, but that will have to.
Yeah, there are, yes, in that northwesterly corner, the panhandle as you referred to it, there are a few other trees that are up in there. I didn't cover it as extensively in my survey as I should have because I felt like it was so far away from what we were doing that it wouldn't be altered or touched.
And likewise, along Ridge Road, you show 4 trees, but there's approximately, if I'm not mistaken, 8 trees.
Yeah, that may be right, yeah. I think what I'm showing on here, there are 2 trees that are still remaining that I understood originally to be part of the removal for the initial tree removal, but they're still there.
So
But
we
going
will-
along with that a little bit,
So we'll wait for the landscape architect to tell us what's going on here.
we could, but I'm thinking that if you approve the application and make the replacement subject to the new tree ordinance, and that is subject to a tree permit, then you will have the ability of their new ordinance to take care of this within the parameters of that ordinance, so that the board doesn't have to be burdened with walking down, well, is it a 6 inch, is it a 5 inch? Is it a Norway
Well,
maple?
I think
That-
we'll burden Mr. Linson.
Exactly. So,
And I think we can do that with your landscape architect and testimony, so we are all on the same page.
very good, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, are there questions from the public? Again, questions. Yes, sir. Come on up and you have to use the microphone.
I have a bunch, so I'm gonna probably need this space here. Todd Glassman, 42 Fernwood Road. Okay, so I think we've been lulled to sleep a little bit here, and some of the dates and all that were not
Questions, please.
exactly what happened, but we're gonna get to that. So, hello, Mr. Clark. So I think you said December 23rd was the first time that you developed a survey for this property, is that correct?
Not quite, that's a little too close to Christmas. December 14th was
December
the day
14th.
that I did the field work.
Okay. And you did the field work, you drafted the site plan. And I mean, this lot, we didn't talk enough about this lot before and what it was. But the constraints of 1,000 square feet disturbance of steep slope, I just want to speak to that quickly and ask you, was it, I mean, it was very convenient to come up with 970 square feet of disturbance before, and now you're here saying you want 4,000, and the front of the house looks great and looks better this way, and blah, blah, blah.
3,800 square feet.
We'd like
3,800.
the- Where's the question?
So the question is, why didn't you come up with this plan on the front end? Was it you, or was it Mr. Michaelopoulos? Who set the standard of we need to be below 1,000 square feet not to trigger the variance?
Well, the city of Summit has that criteria, so it's not coincidence or accidental that we're below the 1,000 square feet when we're trying to get a permit.
Okay.
It's very planned.
Did you recommend that he get a variance on the front end of this?
I mean, there was some discussion about it.
Okay. And what was the reason to or not to? I'm just,
Well, I've encountered on a number of instances with projects in Summit that have steep slopes on the property, that oftentimes there's an impetus for getting work done and getting started on the house. So many times, and it's also been my experience that homeowners and even developers often don't think at length about the exterior of the house. So those decisions are often deferred, or even if they have a decision, they change.
okay, so from the record I see, this property was purchased a year earlier in 2023, February of 2023, if that's correct. It was rented for a year, and.
Question,
Where's the
please.
question?
Okay.
Can we
Sure,
get,
absolutely.
we have to stay with questions.
Absolutely.
Only questions.
Okay, so, so let's move on from the variance. At that time, you weren't sure and you debated, and now you came back and figured it was a good idea.
The witness
along the lines
answered,
of
that
the
was not, excuse me,
Hold on.
objection.
Sure.
The witness answered, and the paraphrasing by the questioner is inappropriate.
Noted. Please,
Okay.
please don't summarize. This
My
is your
apologies.
opportunity for questions. You'll have an opportunity for comment at the end of the meeting, and it
Okay.
will be announced.
So regarding impervious coverage on the site, we talked about that, and we talked about there not.
And
needing-
what is the question?
The question is, did you or did Mr. Michaelopoulos come up with a plan to keep the increase in impervious coverage less than 300 square feet? Who was responsible for that? I mean, it's very relevant in the fact that you guys submitted a plan.
There, he had a question.
Where is?
Let him answer the question, please.
Okay, sure, he's looking
Yeah,
at
I
me
mean,
like
I
you.
don't recall exactly who determined, nobody said, oh, well, let's make sure we're less than 300 square feet. Nobody indicated that in the design process. The house design was done. It included the deck with the patio beneath it and the garage under. And it worked out that was, by removing the driveway in the front, it worked out that we reduced the coverage slightly.
Okay, so again, you guys had over a year to work on the plan.
Again,
Questions.
Well, I
I'm
wasn't
not going to
working
say
on
it
the plan
again,
for over
or,
a year.
Okay.
sir, if you don't ask questions, we'll terminate,
Okay.
and you'll sit down.
Okay.
Questions?
So, okay, I'm gonna move on from that. So you didn't recommend a stormwater management plan, and given the.
Where's the question, sir?
Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
He's gonna keep.
No, you're not.
Just-
Please sit down.
Okay, I've got, I'm sorry, I'm not.
You're not answering, you're not
Okay,
asking
I will keep
questions.
this to questions.
This is the last
Okay.
warning. After this, you
Sure.
will sit down.
Understood. Mr. Clark, approximately how many steep slope variances have you been a part of before this zoning board?
Question is irrelevant, but
Yeah,
goes to
It's
qualification.
probably in the dozens, but I have never bothered to quantify, to
Okay.
be honest.
Have you ever appeared in front of the zoning board after the plans were approved to come back for a variance?
Yes.
Yes, you were, okay. I'll just skip so we don't keep going here. Can you speak to the tree removal on the lot? Okay, I know that.
Okay,
Mr. Katz-
that's a question.
Yes,
Can you speak to the tree?
No.
okay. Because it's your plan.
No, that's it. You've answered the
Okay.
question.
Okay. Can you speak to the effect of of trees removed on the property in relation to stormwater management?
Sure, when you lose some tree cover, there is a direct path for rain to the ground. So there are a lot of statements and ideas that greatly increases or it increases runoff, and I'm not sure that I agree with that in total, but those things are always offset by planting new vegetation which grows and becomes mature trees, and stormwater management improvements, is what I do.
Okay. I just want to know, have you read the comments from the Environmental Commission and the Shade Tree Commission on all the canopy trees to be removed from this property?
I have read that.
Okay. And do you know approximately how many canopy trees there are being removed?
I do not, I have not done that inventory, I'm not the landscape designer.
Okay. Okay, moving on. How many projects would you say you've worked with Mr. Michaelopoulos on over the years?
Probably about 6 or 8.
Okay, and would you know him to follow the City of Summit development rules and follow all the stipulations and conditions on the site plans you created?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Meaning, do you,
Well, we've sometimes gotten
Have you-
variances, which, you know. I
not
guess
variances,
it's
but
not following
the
rules, it's getting a
notations and the
deviation.
contingencies on your plans? Has he followed those in the past?
As much as any other contractor that I've worked
Okay,
with.
okay. So on your site plan, the first point under soil erosion and sediment control notes, could you just read this?
You want me to read my first soil?
Yes,
erosion
please.
note? All soil erosion sediment control practices shall be installed prior to any major soil disturbances or in their proper sequence and maintained until permanent protection is established.
Okay. Were you aware that Mr. Michaelopoulos did not in fact install a silt fence before he began site work?
Objection. It's not in the testimony. It's
Well, I
not, it's
wasn't
not so
aware.
much asking the
I wasn't
question
aware of that.
as it has to be based on the
He's
relevant.
answered, he's not aware, you can move on.
May I provide
He's-
evidence to the court for
he's-
Not at this
no.
point.
Not at this point, okay. Okay. Now on to the disturbance of the steep slopes. When were you made aware of the improper execution of your plan and the subsequent flooding that occurred on our property as a result of disturbing the steep slopes?
Again, objection. It's not in the testimony.
Not
There
there.
wasn't any mention of flooding on the property. You-
You can bring it up under
We can bring it
your
up later.
comments
This is
later.
to his
You can give us testimony when
Okay,
you testify.
Okay, fine, let's go back. So now, regarding the violation, you spoke to the violation, right? This is something that you
I
did testify
outline
about.
the timeline. and
The timeline of the violation, and let me just get the violation here, and the stipulations that were set forth by Mr. Schrager.
We've
Right.
already addressed, the city has
We
confirmed.
have, and this is extremely relevant. So the third point says that you've testified that you were,
This sounds like testimony.
It sure does.
it's a question.
No, I haven't heard a question.
Okay. Can you provide proof of the revised approval from the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District?
We have the report of the board's planner indicating that Aaron Schrager has found everything to be satisfactory. And he was the person, the city engineer, director of the Department of Community Services, who had issued the notice of violation.
So
I don't
the-
have
And,
it with
and
me.
that's it, that's
I don't have
done.
it with me, but it was all generated in support.
And let me
It's been
cut in.
done.
And that was done in your testimony that you did it or Aaron Traeger did it? Because, okay.
All right, sir, the city confirmed, you saw, we read
Yes.
through the comment.
Okay.
That condition has been met. The board is not addressing that point. The board accepts the city's review and determination that it's been met. So that point is
may
not
I
relevant,
enter-
and we're not going to be
Okay.
considering that any
Okay,
further.
Mr. Clark, are you familiar with Matt D'Alessandro, the district manager in charge of the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District?
I don't know that I've met him personally.
Sir, we don't care. It's
Okay.
been
This is
confirmed
why
by
you
the
should
city
care,
that it's
and I'm
done.
just gonna say, because I spoke to him on Friday.
You can
and-
say
You
that
can
later
te-
in
you
the
can talk-
comment
Give us all
portion.
that in your testimony, sir.
This is for
Remember,
questions about the
questions.
testimony.
That's not a question.
You've only been told 10 times.
Okay, okay.
Okay, I think you've had enough of, I think it's time for us to move on.
Okay, sure,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Anyone else from the public with questions? Seeing none, before you go to your next witness, I'm looking at 9 o'clock and an hour and a half in, and I think we all need about 5 minutes. We'll be back at 9:05 if you may.
Very good, Mr. Chairman.
Administrative items that are. We're gonna go to at least 10 o'clock. Oh, yeah. Never mind. If not, we'll. Two cases on tonight. The second case, we've kind of looked around and looked at our fellow Mickey, and there is the probability that we won't be able to complete it tonight, so we've offered the applicant the opportunity to carry. Do we have a date?
Yes, November 19th.
Is that an acceptable date?
It works for my entire team, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I will ask is, I know that's the start of the League of Municipalities Convention. I just want to make sure that we anticipate having a quorum. We've got D relief on our case, so we'd like to make sure we've got a fully constituted board to the extent possible right now. I don't know if,
Is anybody planning to leave? I'm not. It's the League of Municipalities in Atlantic City. And zoning board members are allowed to go if you choose to, just, but I don't think anybody's.
Well, if you
Doesn't sound
insist,
like
Mr. Chairman.
You make it worth my while, I'll go.
No, that's not how that's going to work.
I believe you'll have a quorum for that night.
Yeah, I don't see any reason not to have a quorum.
That's perfect, then, Mr. Chairman.
I think you'll have a full 7-member board.
19th.
That's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes,
Just wanted to make sure.
yes.
It's a Tuesday night.
Works for
Okay.
us.
Is there a motion to carry that case without further notice? You've noticed for the tonight, right?
We did.
Yeah.
Fine.
Moved.
Second.
And you're granting the board the extension
And
of
we'll
time
grant an
back.
extension through the end of November.
usual
That-
motion,
The usual,
right?
absolutely.
Roll call.
Yes. Chairman Steiner?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Loikett?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Kieran?
From the back row. Yeah.
Mr. Malay? Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
The motion carries.
For the record, show that Mr. Curran did rejoin us for this piece of business and is now again leaving us.
Folks, thank you. Have a good night. We appreciate it. We'll see you in
Thank you.
November. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Okay, we are back on the record. Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call Jared Kest to the stand to be sworn in to give testimony in this matter.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Please state your name, spell your last name.
Jarrett Kest. Kest is K-E-S-T.
Thank you, and I know you two have appeared before us before, but once again, there's members of the interested public. If you could briefly describe your background and experience for the board.
Yes, I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing for 25 years as a landscape architect. My office, up until recently, for the last 10, 11 years, is right here in Summit, and the majority of our work has been done in the town of Summit.
Any questions from the board, or would you like to
No,
accept
I
his
think we
credentials?
will- Please, Mr. Weber.
Mr. Kest, are you familiar with the application that's currently pending before the board?
Yes, I am.
And how did you achieve that familiarity?
I was hired by the client to develop a beautiful landscaping plan for his proposed beautiful residence, not uncommon for a landscape architect like myself. Our approach was to create the setting that most people we work for are looking for, and that is a beautiful, lush, mature landscape that responds to the way modern families live, usable spaces, privacy, and so on.
And with regard to the regulatory ordinances of the city of Summit, are you familiar with those as well?
I am, yes.
And you've indicated that you have been requested to prepare a landscaping plan. Would you be so kind as to walk through that landscaping plan for the board?
Sure. So we have an image up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kest, do you mind just talking into the microphone a little bit more closely?
Sorry. Pretty soft-spoken. Okay. Well, maybe we'll just touch on the rendering on the screen. This is a view as taken from the corner of Ridge and Fernwood.
That is still A1, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And this is a 2-scale 3D rendering, photorealistic rendering, just so that our client and anyone who's interested can get a really good idea of what the finished result of our landscape will be. It's a very useful tool because sometimes when a new landscape is installed, time for it to grow and mature and fill in is necessary. And this is an accurate representation of something that would be planted at the time of planting, tree size, and so on. So, like I said, this is as seen from Fernwood and Ridge.
You had prepared, and you prepared this perspective, didn't you, Mr. Kest?
Yes, I did.
And you prepared another perspective as well, that way looking from Fernwood itself, and somewhat in front of the property, the Glassband property. So can you describe what's shown here?
Yes, I can. So, as Andrew Clark had stated, the driveway opening is 8 feet from the glass band's property. And what that does is it allows us to get mature plant material to screen the driveway and this backside of the house. So along the bottom of the retaining wall, we have approximately 5 feet where we have 14 to 16-foot arborvitae planned, but also have another 14 to 16-foot green giant arborvitae planned on top of the driveway. So as you can see in the exhibit on the screen, at time of planting, this is a very densely screened area. And as I mentioned earlier, these models are to scale. There is some artistic license because it is not real, but this is as close as we can get it. And knowing how important it is and the trees are here and the privacy and so on, you know, we did our best to make this as accurate as possible. So what you'll see along, sorry, Jim.
Well, when you say 14 to 16 feet tall, that's at time of planting?
That is correct, yes.
And if I think of a basketball hoop, that's at 10 feet, and the top of a backboard around 13 feet. So does that give an accurate description or analog to what is being proposed in terms of the types of trees that are being installed?
Seems to make a good visual, yes. They're tall trees. These are, you know, machine handled, you know, very mature. They touch each other at the time of planting. I think what we're showing here is very representative of what that would look like.
And you also proposed, and I interrupted, but go ahead.
Yeah, so along this entire edge of the property, existing there are Norway spruce. And the bottoms of these Norway spruce have defoliated, largely because of needle cast that has caused that. And the thing about Norway spruce and other conifers like Norway spruce, these needles don't grow back. So while it is providing some good screening at the high level, the bottom screening is becoming non-existent and will just get worse over time. So our proposal is showing a combination of the 14 to 16-foot arborvitae, but also to counteract the height that is being removed, we're proposing 4 5-inch caliper red maples. So now these are deciduous trees, meaning these trees drop their leaves. But for a good 9 months out of the year, they do have their leaves, and they're quite beautiful. And what they do is they spread a very wide canopy and crown. So while we're screening at the lower levels between the 14 and 16-foot height, we're also getting the upper height. A 5-inch tree is a very significant tree. So we're talking about a tree that's probably 25 feet at the time of planting, or close to it. And we have 4 of them pretty closely spaced. The other thing that is significant about the red maples is that these are trees that are commonly found in wet areas. So what that means is their root system is better suited than some other trees to pick up any excess stormwater in that area. As we move to the west, per earlier testimony.
Also along the northern property line, were there 20 to 22-foot tall trees?
Yes, that's what I'm going to touch on right now. So the highest point of the house, which you'll see in the rendering on the screen, right in front of that, we have proposed 20 to 22-foot arborvitaes. Now, these are monsters, right? In the landscape industry, that's how we refer to them, because they require a crane, they're extremely expensive, and they do a great job the day they're planted. The cost is exponential to, say, a 14 to 16-foot tree. Even though it's only 4 to 6 feet taller, the cost is 5 times the cost for that tree because of the execution, use of the crane, multiple men, safety, and so on. So the combination of a 20 to 22-foot arborvitae with a 3 to 4 foot retaining wall is getting us to 26 feet of screening at the time of planting. So currently, we have spruce that are taller than that, but these are needle cast, suffering from needle cast, and have very poor screening at the bottom. In my opinion, as a landscape architect, this will be a much better scenario for all parties involved.
And the location of those Norway spruce, they're not on the property line, are they?
No, I don't know the exact measurement, but they're a solid 10 feet within our subject property.
Now, I had interrupted. Do you have any other comments with regard to the northern lot line?
So to summarize, the northern lot line has a retaining wall running along it about 5 feet off the property line. We also were mindful to screen this wall as well. So the arborvitae are on the downhill side of that retaining wall and also on the uphill side of the retaining wall. So the intent is to get the maximum height of the trees by having the retaining wall flattening the area, but also hide the visual impact of the retaining wall on the downhill side.
That much being said, the retaining walls that are being constructed are going to be consistent with what was built over on Dogwood. Is that right?
That is my understanding. So natural stone retaining walls, you know, a beautiful material, most likely the same stone or very similar that is used on the residence. Would you like me to continue?
We're waiting for a Google Street View of the Dogwood retaining wall face so that the board can see exactly what it is that you're referring to.
Here we go. Or not. Jim, I don't know why this one's not, it's not working now.
All right.
Give me a second.
With regard to the western property line, I had represented to the board that the hemlocks along that line are going to be preserved. Could you confirm that?
Yes, that is the case.
And what is proposed along the western property line?
We are proposing 13 green giant arborvitaes, smaller, 7 to 8 feet, because similar to the Norway spruce on the north property line, these have dropped their needles at the lower levels like hemlocks do. So what we'll be achieving here is, again, a solid privacy screen at the high level and also the low level. And we have 13, like I said.
And what else is augmented along there? I see another row of trees, PL-15s.
Yeah, so layers in the landscape we find to be more appealing than just like green walls. So, and use of different textures. So we're using skip laurel in front of the arborvitae, in front of the hemlock, gives us a nice 3 layers of different leaf texture, you know, seasonal interest, plus the skip laurels will provide some floral and scent that is appealing usually to most.
Now, there is up on the screen, the street view.
It's gonna come off again.
Well, we had a glimpse.
Okay, I hope that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There we go.
And that is a street view of the retaining wall facing, that is established on the Dogwood property that was built by Mr. Michelopoulos. And your representation on his behalf is that that will be the facing on the retaining walls throughout the site?
Very similar, if not exact, yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, is that the Dogwood house where it hits Hobart Place at the bend?
Yes.
Okay.
Then up in the, what I call the panhandle, what's proposed there?
So it's a unique part of the yard, right? We've created this beautiful, usable lawn in the backyard, but this kind of odd portion of the yard we decided would be a great place as like a little escape, secret garden type area. So we're proposing 2.5 to 3 inch caliper Cherokee Princess flowering dogwoods. So these are native disease-resistant dogwoods in a really appealing arc, extending some ground covers and lawn up through there, and there will be an existing white oak remaining in there. And so it's basically a shade garden.
And then as we go toward Ridge Road, and we look at the plants that are proposed there, it had been indicated that that's the area of steep slopes that's not gonna be disturbed. And you show a couple of new trees there. You show an existing tree to remain, and you show another existing tree to remain. And as it was indicated previously, the 4 trees that are there now will remain. But these trees, you have, what is this?
So we have red maples, or red oaks, I'm sorry. QR is red oak. Those are also 4-inch caliper, again, 20 plus, maybe 25 feet at the time of planting, significant trees.
And then you have a ASGM.
That's a Green Mountain sugar maple. Again, very commonly used in town. I've probably planted 200 of these in the last 10 years in town. Beautiful orange fall color. So the combination of the red oak with its vibrant, red fall color with the orange behind it really would be spectacular, in my opinion.
And you'll be able to move these trees to keep them out of the steep slope area that exists next to the construction drive?
The one red oak that's close to the property line most likely would have to move, to the east a couple of feet to do that, but yes.
Then you heard the discussion with regard to providing a sight distance at the intersection of Ridge and Fernwood. And what type of plantings do you propose along that corner?
So right now, we're just showing it as a deciduous shrub, meaning a shrub that drops its leaves like a hydrangea or similar, nothing tall. At this point, we usually just specify trees, and then we'll have the flexibility to pick the shrub. But for this conversation, those are hydrangeas.
And then with regard to the western side of the retaining wall, what plants are proposed there?
So this is a beautiful bosque of Yoshino cherries. Yoshino cherry is a white flowering cherry.
I'm sorry, a beautiful bosque?
Bosque, sorry.
What,
Landscape speak. A row, a beautiful row of Yoshino cherries, which are a white flowering cherry. These are the indicator of spring, right? These are the trees that, signal that winter is ending and the beautiful white flowers, make everyone happy. So along the entire top of that wall, we have, what is the quantity there? 12 of them. And these are also pretty mature. We did a similar project on the corner of Bedford and Woodland, where these really create a beautiful spring display.
You heard me represent to the board that if the board approves the application, that the tree replacement will be subject to the newly adopted tree ordinance. And that would be in addition to what you're proposing here. Do you find that acceptable?
Yes, I do.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Marie, you have anything?
I do not have anything at this time.
Ed?
Chairman, just real quick questions. In that northwesterly corner, I think it was indicated earlier there might be more trees saved in that far corner. Do you know of that? Is that the case?
That corner, it just shows one tree to remain.
Right.
And so the position would be that the other trees would be removed.
Okay, in that area. Also on your landscape plan, you show a double line that follows along the front of the property. It's adjacent to the walk as well, but it runs parallel to Ridge Road. Is that a retaining wall, or is that just a graphic for another edge? We should probably follow the retaining walls in the engineering plan.
Yeah, those are not retaining walls. That's just signifying the edge of the bed where it transitions to lawn.
I see. Okay, so those are not retaining walls. Is there retaining walls also by the patio area in the back as well?
There are not.
Okay, those are just lines.
Yep. Yeah, those are also the edge of like a mulch bed
Your
to
graphics.
grass. Yep.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I do have further questions, Mr. Chairman, following the board
Yeah.
members.
Question to the board, from the board.
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
On your northern side, how do you propose maintaining the bushes that are planted on the downslope from the retaining wall, given that, based on your design, you would have to walk on the neighbor's property?
Not necessarily. These are mountain laurels and arborvitae. The arborvitae are just arborvitae, right? Pretty little to no maintenance other than, maybe mulching the beds, but even still, after the first few years, they're so full that there wouldn't even really be required. There would be drip irrigation there to make sure that they live. But beyond that, I don't see much, if any, maintenance would be required to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then earlier, there was a testimony about sightlines, particularly coming up Fernwood as you go into Ridge. Based on this, I'm not seeing any, how much area is there between the curb and your plantings for people to walk on the property?
That's approximately, I don't have a dimension there. We have, before the radius, you have at least 10 feet of flat lawn before you get to the hydrangea and then the retaining wall.
Thank you.
I have a question. Hi, can you go back to the picture from the perspective of the house on Fernwood? And where the picture, the illustration you did showed the house up on the hill, the proposed, the applicant's house. When you were discussing the heights of the trees, you had mentioned regarding the height of the home. Do you know, what number did you use? What height did you have for the building height for that?
I think we need
What is the height?
Andrew for that, right?
Right, I'm not up to speed on the height of the home.
The plans that have been submitted to the board show a height of 37.9.
Okay. For this is between R25 and R43 zone. The building height max is 35. So you're saying it's 30,
It's 37.9. It's allowed to be the additional 3 feet if you have a certain roof pitch.
And that was included in your building permit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take this one. I'm looking at Mr. Linson's comments, both from 725 and 829, talking about this particular plan. Basically says that your plan doesn't address any of his comments. What would your comment be on that, and how can we get the two landscape folks together?
With regard to his prior comments, I think those were the August comments, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm looking at August 29, and he says the revised landscape plan of 624, and this is what he testified to, is the landscape plan of 624, do not address his comments. And his comments go on, including information from the board, et cetera. And I would like to hear the experts' feeling towards Mr. Linson and the comments from the Shade Tree Advisory Committee, which are negative.
Well, if I can.
Now, I'd like to hear from the expert.
Very good. Let's bring up the report.
I think this cord might be dying on us.
It's the board.
I think so, because both iPads, it's just taking a long time to. If I could just read John Linson's report
Sure.
to clarify.
Read it with the date.
Sure, this is the dated John Linson, City Forester, July 25th, 2024 report.
Right, and there's also one 829.
I'm sorry,
There's also one on 829.
829 report.
24, yes.
Can I see that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I hope you were given it.
the copy if you can, and, well, we don't have access right now.
I don't have that.
I have the other one if you
That
want it
is
too.
dated August 28th. The old one was, we have two
I
prior
have
reports,
725.
725.
I'm sorry.
The
Sorry,
725
Jay.
report.
I got Jay with the microphone.
It does note, this is a comprehensive tree replacement plan, which includes planting 31 deciduous trees and 57 evergreens. The replacement landscape plans provide screening to the adjacent properties and is appropriate for the site.
They're my only copy. I'm assuming I'll get another copy from you if I need it later.
Then he goes on to provide with the Shade Tree Advisory Board.
And there's a page of
Provided.
commentary there.
Correct.
I know, you haven't seen it either.
Okay. No, I've seen the comments.
You have
So
seen
the-
it.
This one's
Yeah.
new.
So the comments that are dated 8/29/24 refer to what he had marked on the attached plan.
Which I haven't seen either.
We have not seen that either. We had asked today whether or not it was filed with DCS,
I didn't have it.
so makes it a little bit problematic, but nonetheless, it indicates that his comments were dated 7/25/24, which we've just received recently. And again, a lot of this went on in July. So, for example, the report from Lindsay Knight, your board's planner, that was in July. So there was the summer that we were dealing with this. And in this report, the landscape, and may I, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
And I'm quoting, "The landscape plan as proposed, with the exception of the preservation of one tree in the northwest corner of the property." This is basically a clear cut and do-over. "The proposed grade changes make it impossible to preserve additional trees. The applicant has provided a comprehensive tree replacement plan, which includes planting 36 deciduous trees and 57 evergreen trees. The replacement landscape plans provide screening to the adjacent properties and is appropriate for the site." So if you could, Mr. Kest, respond to that, and then we can get back to the Shade Tree Advisory report as well, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. So as I customarily do every project where there's going to be tree removal, I set up an appointment with Mr. Linson, and I meet him on the property, and we walk the property, and that's what we did on this property. I brought the landscape plan with me, and he basically echoed the comments that Mr. Weber just said to the board. He also added a few other comments while I was there that didn't show up in the report, but I feel it important to add to this conversation, is that, you know, he knew that we would do a good job, and, you know, he trusted that this would be a better result in the end. He also felt uncomfortable with those 3 towering trees so close to this big, new, beautiful home. So that did not make its way into the report, but I'm testifying that that was a conversation I had with the city forester. So that will add to, when we get to the Shade Tree Commission comments about the 3 trees in question, you know, partly why these trees should be removed in the backyard.
And then he had indicated that there's only 1 tree remaining, but there's actually a few more.
Sure, there's several trees remaining, and a majority of the trees that we are removing, the beech specifically, have beech leaf disease. Now, this is treatable, but, you know, this has to be treated in perpetuity. We met with an arborist on site, and unless you're willing to invest annually to spray these trees or inject them, they're unfortunately going to die. And that's unfortunately true for all beech trees. Just like the American elm suffered Dutch elm disease many years ago, that's kind of the plight of the beech tree. So we are not currently planting new beech trees. we're planting what we're calling the successive forest in Summit, meaning, we have 7,500-year-old trees in town, but they do not live forever either, right? This is a suburban neighborhood. It's not nature. It's not the woods, so to speak. So when we plant a 4 or 5 inch tree, what we're in fact doing is creating the next 75 to 100-year canopy, which has to be done, right? So it is a trade-off. Yes, we love the big trees, 3 in particular in the backyard here, but the net gain is so much more substantial over the long term, in our opinion, and also allowing the yard to be sculpted in a way that helps with stormwater management and also creates a usable backyard for anyone that's going to live in this house, we feel outweighs, the negative of the removal of those 3 trees.
Mr. Kest, do you have a summary or a memo that talks about the state of ill health for the trees marked for removal? Has there been any information
Like a
like that
report?
summarized and shared with Mr. Linson?
No, at the time when I met with Mr. Linson, I was not even aware that these trees had the disease. We recently met with a tree company out there, a certified arborist. I don't have a written report, but I suppose we could have one. But he educated us and showed us the leaf.
Might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, showed us the nematodes in the leaf. I mean, every single one of those trees has beech leaf disease.
In the report, it says the trees appear healthy, but that's a visual
But they don't-
report. Right.
But that's not based on
Study.
the review of an arborist or
Correct,
someone
yeah.
with that kind of training.
Sounds like our executive session, but we're not ready for that yet.
Sorry, not yet, not yet. Just thinking out loud.
We're just
If
getting
we
warmed
go
up.
into the comments from the shade tree, you wanted to go into
Very
those
good.
separately?
If I can read aloud. Top of the page, 2B-24-2245, comments continued. The Shade Tree Advisory Board discussed this application and offers the following comments, : the existing trees on the steep slopes are all reasonably healthy, period. The removal of these trees and the removal of the perimeter steep slopes is not essential to the development of the property, period. The board felt very strongly that all of the trees in the proposed rear lawn area and the northwest corner of the property should be preserved, period. Presently, this area acts as a water retention area for this property as well as the property to the west. The removal of these trees is not essential to the development of the property, period.
And that basically was in addition to the 724 report that he made earlier.
Correct.
So we have it dated.
Mr. Kest, can you comment with regard to the observations of the Shade Tree Advisory Committee?
Yes, well, kind of backing up to my previous comment, a quick visual inspection, they may have seen healthy trees, and when in fact they're not healthy, right? So that's just the way that is. But anyone who has seen this property would quickly recognize that this has been, an unmaintained, kind of wild mess for a while. It looks nothing like any of the beautiful homes in Summit, and especially along the front of the property where these diseased beech trees are currently living. Regrading of that area is essential to creating what I would describe as a normal landscape that is appropriate for a home like this. We have artificial berms, like Mr. Weber and Mr. Clark stated, were created most likely from the digging of the foundation of this home decades ago. These are not natively occurring trees. These were planted and unmaintained for decades. So in our opinion, what we're planting, which is, 4 red oaks of 4-inch caliber and 2 sugar maples of 4-inch caliber along the front, far surpasses anything that is out there currently. And will also be, healthy nursery grade A stock material, maintained and, you know, really setting the canopy forward for years to come, especially on the street-facing side. You know, in the rear yard, we have a white, a black, and red oak. We have a 26-inch, a 36, well, two 36 and one 26 diameter trees. These are healthy, but like the report says, you know, it's a retention area. That is not a positive thing on a residential backyard. That means it's going to be wet all of the time, right? So what Andrew Clark's plan is proposing is to flatten that area, and the unfortunate consequence is that we have 3 trees that will be removed to do that. But the benefit of that will be, one, we'll get rid of the steep slopes in the backyard that are shedding, you know, onto the neighbor's property and also creating a wet area on my client's property. And two, the replacements will create that successive kind of suburban forest that I was speaking about earlier, so that we're getting healthy new trees and we'll have the next 75 to 100 years instead of these 3 looming trees, you know, in between these 2 properties.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
When you say leveling off the backyard, and maybe this isn't your area of expertise, I should have maybe asked the other gentleman. How much topsoil are we putting in there? Are we putting 5 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet?
No, I'm able to answer it. You
Okay.
know, the elevation of the patio, I believe, is approximately 104. And the grade slowly rises from approximately 99 to 104. So 4 to 5 feet maximum, but only for like a small area, and then anywhere from 2 to 4 feet of fill. And that retaining wall along the north side basically is creating this flat plane, which creates this flat backyard that won't be wet all the time.
Any questions? Did I get to you guys earlier? Do either of you have questions? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go
Okay,
ahead.
no, that's okay. Is it, oh God, cross-exam, I always hate, is it possible? Because it's possible. Is it realistic? If we've got 2 to 4 feet of grade change and these 3 really big trees, to build some kind of well around those trees so that they can continue to exist on site, and you still level the lawn, without regard to whether it's a good backyard?
To answer directly, no. Any disturbance I have found over the years, especially in Summit, not even actually near the tree, is ultimately stressing out the trees. So by putting tree wells and things about that, you're artificially creating, you know, 3 more feet for water and nutrients to get through, to get to the actual tree roots. So in my expert opinion, no, there's not a way to do that.
Okay, anybody else from up here? No? Okay, at this point, we
Mr.
will
Chairman,
open.
I wanted to follow up with the Environmental Commission's comments.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Kast, did you have an opportunity to review the report of the Environmental Commission? Now, there were Environmental Commission reports in July, which did not have an objection. And then we have the most current one, which was authored by a different environmental commissioner, which then raises these points. So, and this would be the Environmental Commission report that has a date
September 6th?
I'm looking at July 30th, 2024, and this is where Laura Mendenhall, on behalf of the Environmental Commission, I do not object to the requested variance, so we should go to the current one. So there was a view that did not have an objection to now the current one.
What was the date of that?
That was July 30th, 2024. Well, that was August
This
1st.
section. That's the new section.
No, this isn't it.
That is the new section.
No, the one by Ms. Cho. So if we can find the one by Ms. Cho,
That's September 6th.
September 6th.
Yeah.
And so Ms. Cho is the one I wanted to talk to Mr. Kest about.
Here you go.
Thank you. Have you had a chance to review the report of the Environmental Commission that is dated September 6, 2024, with the author being Francie Cho?
Yes, I have.
All right, with regard to the first paragraph, let me just stop there. The first few paragraphs runs through the history, indicating that permits were received. And then we go to the second page. We turn the page over, then we'll be going to her first observation. Unless there's any questions with regard to the history of the permitting and the tree removal.
Well, the main comment here is that trees larger than 12 inches in diameter at breast height, the city ordinance was adopted on June 24th, and our plan was created prior to that. So, our client is, willing to abide by the updated ordinance. So as far as tree replacement, number of shade trees removed and replaced with shade trees, we are, obviously willing to do that. And then as far as trees removed 12 inches, because typically it was 16 inches prior to the new ordinance. So anything 12 inches, we would also be replacing with a shade tree in kind.
And then this next paragraph down on page 2 indicates that there's well-established healthy evergreens, but if your understanding from your conversations and inspection with the certified arborist, and this is what the vice chairman has also indicated that needs to be supplemented, we're actually suffering from needle cast.
Yes, we just recently, this past week, reviewed them again, and they are suffering from needle cast, and we did meet with an arborist on that.
There was also a comment with regard to minimizing the size of the paved surfaces and using green infrastructure. On behalf of the applicant, are you willing to consider it as part of the hardscaping?
Absolutely. I think, this is a pretty minimal backyard program to begin with. It's a reasonably sized patio for a dining table and a sitting area, and that's all. But as far as, using dry set material is more pervious than wet set, meaning mortar set material. So that's one option we can certainly explore.
And then with regard to the final condition to being the submission of an accurate landscape plan and further consideration, you've indicated on behalf of the applicant that you're willing to be subject to the newly adopted tree removal ordinance of the city of Summit.
That is correct, yep.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman, but I would like, if I could, would it be possible to have a 3-minute interval? Because I want to speak with Mr. Michalopoulos with the comment that the vice chairman had with regard to the presentation of a report confirming the beech leaf disease and the needle cast.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wonder whether or not you want to handle the HPC first.
HPC actually had no comment.
No, it does.
The historic preservation?
Yeah. They said no architect,
They have a,
they don't have anything, there were a number of I can't find the one I was looking for in Bergmeyer.
Right. I remember, but I think he said it was.
All right, and if you have no comment on it, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, then we will take a 3-minute, which means back at 10.
Very good.
Okay.
There it is. I know it's in here, I just haven't. Okay, Mr. Weber, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Vice Chairman had asked a question about the submission of a report with regard to the beech leaf disease and the needle cast. And at this point, I'm wondering whether or not the board would prefer to have that additional information, have a more detailed landscaping plan before proceeding further on this application. So that was my inquiry, Mr. Chairman, if you have any willingness to see if that's how the board is feeling.
I'm always willing to ask them. I'm not sure I'm going to like what they have to say. Anyone would like to comment on that?
I think that makes sense, and I think giving it to Mr. Linson for his review as well also makes sense.
I would, because there is a large number of public here tonight, I'm going to ask our attorney, would it be appropriate to allow the public to make any comments that they would like? They certainly would have another opportunity at the end to make comments, because some of them may have heard what they needed to hear tonight.
So, I mean, usually the
Do
procedure
two.
is we wait until the end of all the testimony so that the public hears the entire
Right.
presentation, including the most up-to-date plans. Though you have the discretion to consider things out of order and consider comments at this point, at least on what we've heard so far. But that's, the only issue is if we waste time discussing previous versions of plans when there's updated information coming.
We'll try to ask people to be very concise in what they ask or what they say. And we're not talking about asking questions, we're talking about opinions now. And they'll be sworn if indeed we do this.
Mr. Chairman, just before we
Yes.
move, Mr. Weber said that you may maybe make a change to a plan if after this certificate comes out or meeting with the forester. Did I misunderstand what you were saying?
Well, so one of the points that's been raised is the number of trees. For example, Andrew Clark had included a 2-inch and a 2.5-inch tree as being removed. Well, obviously, they're not trees. Likewise, I've been referring to the panhandle. Well, we know there's additional trees there, and so we don't have that definitive solid count. We were hoping to be able to say, fine, we'll go through the new process of the tree removal ordinance, and that way there will be that definitive count. But in terms of hearing the Vice Chairman's question about the beech leaf, it just would provide an opportunity. Let's get everything in a row, and let's get it nailed down.
I'll leave it up to you, that's why you're the chairman.
Thank you. I think it makes sense to do it that way. I'm just torn at making perhaps some people that, what are we looking at as a date?
About how long do you think you would need, Mr. Weber?
Well, the glass bands have certainly expressed their interest. My time would be 30 minutes.
Well, that's what you said tonight.
Yeah, I know. So I think 45 minutes would probably be appropriate.
Plan an hour. Then we have still our end of it. So we would have to plan for 90 minutes, I think.
Okay, if we're planning that much, then I would say December 2nd.
Wow.
Does that work for you?
We can do I mean, that's appropriate. I think that's fair. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
My concern is that we just have the right information, not
Right.
only for the client, for the.
And unfortunately, I think we're going to have to ask the public to wait for their
Yeah.
comments until the end.
I just want everybody to have the right information so that everybody gets their say, the correct say. That's my opinion.
I
Chief,
have a concern, yes, because here we are, I don't know what date today is. What goes on from now on, we can't, I've said this before, and I know everyone doesn't agree with it, but there was something stopped in March, things kept going on. What's to say that things aren't gonna keep going on, and then December comes? And
They're following the building permit and are being monitored by the city. Nothing relative to what they were stopped for can come up again. It's over.
Well, I think your concern is they have a building permit.
They have a building permit, but
can build.
they were stopped because of disturbing stuff, and at that point, the whole entire plan could have been revised and said, wait a minute, maybe where the driveway was going to be is the reason why you had to remove the trees.
If I can jump in, just keep in mind, we're not the enforcing agency. We're here to consider this application. So if some enforcement issue comes up, it can be enforced by the city if it's outside the scope of what we're here considering tonight. So that's kind of the remedy that if they go that route. But, we're here to consider the application.
And because there may be changes, et cetera, I think we're going to have to ask the public to come back and get their comments in at the end, as they would on a normal application. I don't want to give anybody an opportunity to say we didn't follow procedure, which we should do.
So can I just ask a quick question?
So I would look for a motion at this point to carry this to December the 2nd.
And Mr. Chairman, I think,
Can I just
Without
ask-
further notice, I'll get to him in a second. And you're going to give us the time to act and all.
that's correct. We
and
extend
no
the time
further
within,
notice.
we extend the
Right.
time within which the
That would
board
be
may
the
act on this
motion I'll look
application.
for after Don says what Don's
Okay,
going to say.
so real quick. So tomorrow, if the applicant decides, I don't want to move forward with this, I'm going to go back to the original plan, where are we?
That's not going to happen.
I
So-
know, but let's just
If it does,
amuse
we-
me.
Well, that kind
They'll
of.
hear it. They can always withdraw the application for
And
a variance.
they can build what the original plan was, if you choose to.
That's just.
But I don't
it's-
see that
Okay, all
happening.
right.
None of us
It's
see
not
that
happening.
happening, but that is an option.
But that's not in front of the board.
I agree.
Okay, I'm looking for that motion I just outlined.
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
I didn't hear a second,
Claire.
did you?
Claire.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Chairman
call.
Steiner?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Loikett?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Malay? Ms. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
No.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please, we still have some business to do, so as you're leaving, quietly, please.
Welcome back.
We have some resolutions,
No, we don't.
Extensions.
extensions,
Resolutions for
Extension.
resolutions for extensions.
Welcome back.
The first one being Gilman Levine, which is 226 Hobart Avenue. This is the second extension. We received an email and then a little letter and then additional emails from them explaining what their issues are, which are
They need some additional time to finish revising the second phase of their application, which was reducing the scope of the application actually beyond what they were previously approved. They do plan on having those revisions done in August and hopefully refined by October, and then being able to submit for building permits in early 2025.
okay. Is there a motion to pass, there is a resolution?
Wait, so this is this is the second?
Right.
Second
This is their second time.
extension.
Okay, and then we have been
But-
doing this, right? That we've been giving
We've been
everybody?
granting
Right.
2 years now
Yes,
instead of
so-
just a 1 year.
Okay, so
So-
this will be,
Under the current grant of 2 years, this would be their, if you
Their
look at it
first.
this way, this would be their first request, had we given them 2 years initially like we do currently.
so it'd be 2 years total, not 3.
This will be 3 years total, which would be a first extension of what we currently grant, which is 2 years. We usually grant 1-year extensions on top of that.
And the project is
The
going to be
approval is
smaller
good
than
for
what we
1
approved.
year,
Yes.
right, and then we're granting 2 years on top of that.
Correct. They're.
Meaning the recent conversations that we've had. Is that the correct? We're granted 1 year approval and then we'll be granting people 2 years at least at the last
We
meeting.
did that
No, what we're
recently
doing is
for
now, in
somebody
the
else.
first approval is now for 2 years.
Right.
Got
And
it,
then
yes.
we have added a third year on occasion, and this would be, in essence, this would be their
Year.
third year.
Got it.
But
That's
they,
clarified.
but they didn't get 2 years in the beginning, they got 1 year, then they got a second year, and now this would be the third.
So can we just say this is it? Like, yes, we'll give you a.
No, you always have to consider future.
You always have to, they can always
requests,
come back.
And you can deny it at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And the fact that they're making it, proposing to make it smaller than
Yes.
what we had initially planned. I mean, as opposed to just sitting
Yeah,
on a plan that we had already approved.
Yeah, they're actually getting, removing a room, if I'm not mistaken, that they had initially planned to do.
Yeah. Yeah, or not adding a room they had
Yeah.
initially planned to
It
add.
is removing the scope of an
It's usually
addition.
remove their
Yeah.
plans. Anyway.
So you
They
need a
had
motion.
done phase one.
Yes.
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Chairman Steiner,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Loiketz,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Mr. Feskins,
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, and the next one is for 47 Hawthorne Place. And they are hoping to start this one in spring of 2025. And they have engaged Rosa and Kelly Conway to get the construction drawings going.
And this is a first request.
Right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Roll call, please.
Yes. Chairman Steiner,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Malay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Loiketz,
Yes.
Ms. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Mr. Feskins.
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
We've been overworking, Stephanie, so there are no minutes for approval, and we've overworked, I guess we haven't gotten the resolution, the transcript yet, so you haven't been able to get everything
It
done
just
there.
hasn't been 30 days because
Yeah.
of the break in August.
Right, so our next meeting is October 7th. Motion to adjourn?
Quick question. Good.
Yes.
If we have an indication that it's not gonna be 30 minutes, it's gonna be 2 hours, and someone else has a simpler application, can we flip those? Just
Yes.
because out of respect for other applicants bringing in experts, et cetera?
Yeah, that's,
That's always within the discretion of the chair to decide the order of the applications on any particular evening.
and I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect 3 hours.
But the other one wouldn't have been shorter, though.
No.
I
No,
expect the other one to be
it-
long.
I knew that one had some issues.
Got it.
Either one of them was gonna be an hour and a half.
Thanks.
So moved. Second, all those in favor, come back on October 7th.
I didn't get a motion or a second, though.
So moved.
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
Okay.
Thank you all. Good night. We made it by 10:15.